Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. We have a pretty full agenda and also attendee list right now, but I am so excited. Thank you all so much for joining us right now. I am so excited to introduce Jadrian Wooten. Sorry, I mentioned this. He is our amazing professor who is going to be kind of walking through his overall online courses today and specifically really focusing on how do you transition these courses online in a Jiff. He has not transferred during a global pandemic before, but has made some really incredible online courses as accessible as humanly possible. So, very excited to share all of his tips and tricks and get out of the way so that you can really listen to him. But I did want to just quickly make sure that we have the lay of the land for this agenda to make sure that you all have total transparency into how to work with the system. So before we get started, please use the chat on the left side of your screen to connect with any other attendees. You can either message the whole group or someone individually. Please check the private to presenter box if you have any technical issues connecting. It'll go right to me. I will answer it. And use the second icon at the top of your screen to ask questions. It looks right like this with the smiley face and the little question box. That will help us filter any and all questions right up to Jadrian so that he can make the most of them and get you some fast answers. The agenda today is a quick overview of just basically what is Packback, what is this tool that kind of brought you in here today, then also transitioning those courses with Dr. Wooten, and then an open Q&A. So again, just make sure that all your most burning questions get the most effective answer. Really quickly before I kick this over to Jadrian and get the heck out of here, a quick overview of Packback is that we are an AI-supported online discussion platform that works to improve student curiosity, critical thinking, and writing skills through both the interaction of our AI, but also the training and consultation that we do to implement Packback into a course in the most effective way and provide the most support possible for both our instructors and our students. Jadrian will cover a little bit more of that and we can get into the nitty gritty details if you have any more specific questions, but I wanted to thoroughly embarrass Jadrian and heap some hefty praise onto him. He currently is an award-winning educator at Penn State within the Department of Economics. I will let him cover a little bit more of his research, overall pedagogy, but I'm very grateful not only to him, but for all of you here today, not only taking strides to improve your online classroom, but for giving me a reason to wear real clothing. Can't tell you how much I appreciate that. That being said, I will kick it on over to Jadrian.
Thank you, Anne. So she did tell me that there's chat stuff going on, so I'll try to look at that, or they'll flag me down if there's something that it's a burning question. If you want to interrupt me, feel free to interrupt me in the process. So when I started thinking about how did I transition stuff, so I think I'm going to say I'm lucky in that Penn State switched over to remote learning early on. So I'm officially in week 3 of remote learning. So they switched us up over during spring break, but we have a relatively early spring break. And so I got to think about it before I think a lot of other people started thinking about it. And then I tried to outline exactly if I have to switch over, what are my big goals and what are the things that I wanted to think about in that transition. So I was lucky we were on spring break, but we came back right after and had to start teaching. And so when I sat down to start thinking about, okay, now I have to completely change my class online. What do I want to do? What do I want to change? And the big thing was just thinking about what was my goal during this entire transition. And I think a lot of us jumped into this idea of just thinking like, well, my goal is obviously just to get through the rest of this semester. And so one of my hopes for at least for the next 15 minutes or so is to get you thinking about potentially other goals, to use this as kind of a learning opportunity to think about what else you can get out of this transition to remote learning. The second portion is thinking about, what does your syllabus currently say? We always tell students it's in the syllabus, but I have a feeling that most of us haven't looked at our syllabus since January. And so a little bit of it is thinking about actually going back to our syllabus and relying on that to kind of move forward. And then really kind of tying it all together is thinking about what can we take into next year? What can we take into the fall? Is there something that we can actually get out of this as a positive? So I know I've spent a lot of time, especially like when we first switched, I spent a lot of time with my students thinking about that this is not what we came for. This is not how we started this semester. I don't think any of us even anticipated anything remotely close to this. So the first day, the first week was really thinking about, that this is not ideal. This was not the ideal situation. And then the second week kind of turned into optimism. The second week was really a lot of, what are the good things that are coming out of this, reconnecting with family, starting to get regrounded in terms of communication with people, and starting to get us to think about, do we really have hobbies? So like, I'm very lucky. I read a lot. So this has been great for me in terms of my reading. But we're starting to realize that some people don't have hobbies, and hobbies are a healthy thing. And so a lot of it, the second week of class was really optimism. And so those of you who are transitioning now, I do want to give you some hope in that if it's anything like mine, the first week was a little pessimistic. The second week had a lot more optimism in it. And even now we're starting our third week and things feel a lot better than they were before. And so with that in mind, a lot of what I wanted to spend my time thinking about was how do we transition your courses online quickly? Some of you maybe started today. Some of you are getting a couple of days. I know whenever we transitioned, the first thing I did was I emailed my students and said, hey, I don't have answers for you right now. Give me a couple days and I'm going to get some answers for you. Even when we first met, there were some situations where I said, look, I don't have an answer for you yet. Give me a little bit more time. And so that's really my goal, is thinking about first, defining your goals in the process, and thinking about what do you actually want to get out of this? What do you hope to achieve? Rightly so, I think a lot of our focus has been on what's good for our students, and I don't want to discount that, but you're important too. You should have goals for yourself as well. So for me, this is my first bullet. I wanted to maintain some kind of normalcy. We are not living in normal times whatsoever. And so a lot of my goal was, how can I make my classes as normal as possible? My students signed up for exams. They signed up for weekly quizzes. They signed up for Packback. They signed up for clickers. And so what I wanted to do was say, what can I change? And how can I keep this as close to what they signed up for? I didn't want to get rid of the exams and turn it into a paper, because they didn't sign up to take paper. They didn't sign up to write papers. They signed up for a class that was exams. And so it's little things like that. I wanted to maintain normalcy. That was my goal. That's not everybody's goal. But I think a little bit of it is thinking about what are some of your goals in the process. One of my other goals was thinking about being an ally to my students who don't necessarily have a strong voice. This switch to remote learning has opened up the opportunity for people who don't talk very much to get to talk. And I think it's important that we think about, how do we make sure that their voices are heard in this process? I know for me, a lot of my classes, you're able to be anonymous, which helps a lot of students. But just making sure that we hear those voices, even though we're not physically together, is making sure that we can hear those voices and represent those people. Making sure that your assignments, your changes, anything like that, that those actually are, as best as you can, available to everybody. And then the last portion, this I think will surprise a lot of you, is this is also an opportunity to connect with your students on a more personal level. So I know that I teach really large classes, so they can be as big as 700. This semester, the biggest one is 150. And to be honest, I don't get to know a lot of students really well. I get to know a couple students pretty closely. But this remote learning portion allows me to actually type and chat and talk to students who would not have talked to me in person, but now they can talk to me through a text portion. So I make sure I log in early. I log in 10 minutes before, just like I would show up 10 minutes before class. I stick around for 10 minutes after class, and the people who are texting and chatting with me are way different than the people who would talk to me in a normal class. And so I think if your goal is to try to get to know your students a little bit better, this remote learning is a really good opportunity. If you're moving to online classes where you want to start having discussion boards, you can learn a lot about your students. If you change your homework examples to actually have like a share your experience, you can get to know your students a lot better. But I think what's important is thinking about first yourself. Be a little self-interested. Think about what is going to help you get through the rest of this semester. If you're not in a good place to finish this semester, you can't expect to help everyone else get through the rest of the semester. So for me, it was normalcy, right? I wake up every day, I get dressed. Unlike Anne, I wear normal clothes every day because like I want my time to feel like I'm still at work. And so a lot of it is thinking about what's the best way for your mental health to get through all of this process. So that's the first one. And I know that doesn't seem like it has anything to do with like getting your class online, but a lot of it is get yourself ready for the rest of this semester. At that point, then you can start thinking about, okay, how do we change things? So I think from a professor standpoint, one of our favorite phrases that we probably get tired of saying is, it's in the syllabus. Surprisingly, I think the answers to how do you change this course to an online course are probably in your syllabus. And if you've written a really strong syllabus, I think you probably don't have to deviate much from that. And so a lot of it is going back through your syllabus and thinking about what things need to change and what things can stay the same. So having office hours, you can still have office hours at the same time and be available for your students through Zoom or through any meetings or any kind of online software. Thinking about each individual assignment, you can still do those assignments, but you can do them in your course LMS or CMS. So for me, I have weekly quizzes over different readings that they have to read. And we used to do them in class and they could use their notes. And then I sat there and I go, well, how can I change this? How in the world can we get the same thing? Canvas allows for quizzes that will pull from a random question bank and students can enter their questions directly in there. If anything, it's actually probably easier to grade than having to grade their handwriting. And so it's little things of just thinking about what are the tools that are in your LMS. Your LMS probably has a lot of tools that you have used the same tools every semester, just from like a status quo bias, and not realized that there's actually a lot of really neat features that you can do. So we used to do the quizzes in class, the quizzes are now online. So that typically is the easy one, is going piece by piece and saying, well, look, we used to have discussion sections. How do I do discussion sections online? We used to do quizzes. How do I do quizzes online? And so that's kind of the easy, natural step. The second step is thinking about, okay, where can I insert some flexibility? So the easiest flexibility, I can tell you when I first started, I was dead set that we were still going to do these quizzes during class time. In the very initial stages of, I want to keep doing quizzes, I naively thought like I'm still going to do them at 2:00. I'm not changing. I was convinced that's the normal time we do it. We're going to keep doing it at that time. It took me about an hour and a half to realize that a lot of my students are not in the same time zone. A lot of my students are in literally every time zone that we have. And I started to reevaluate my syllabus. And there's a really good book called The Hidden Course, of just thinking about all of the rules that you have in your course. You've probably defaulted on some of these rules, thinking about these are the rules these are how you've always done them. But this remote learning opportunity has really given me a chance to kind of sit back and say, are these the right rules? Does it really have to be at 2:00? Can I just let them do it by the end of the day? Can there be some flexibility in what they're doing? And so I think this is a good opportunity for all of us to go back, look at the rules that we've established. I know when I first started teaching, my syllabus was like 2 pages. I had this idea that it was only ever going to be 2 pages. I wanted to make sure that they read the syllabus, and then like it keeps getting longer and longer and longer. This has really opened up the opportunity for me to think about, are the rules there to help them learn the material, or are the rules there because like that's the rule I've picked and I like? So thinking about being flexible, right? You can still do quizzes, but can you do them online? I still have exams, so we're doing exams online, but I'm giving them like a 5-hour window to take a 2-hour exam. And so it's little things like that, is, again, taking advantage of the tools. I think one of the most overwhelming things that happened when we first switched to remote was basically that we got inundated with all of these online tools. And then all of a sudden we had to step back and say like, okay, which ones work for me? And so this is a really good opportunity that I think we can start switching and actually taking advantage of some stuff. So the big challenge I think is, as you're thinking about switching things over, is think about what you want to get out of this semester, right? Like, what can we take forward? This is an opportunity to experiment. I was very nervous about switching to remote because I was going to miss my students. And then after like a day or two, I realized I basically get to put an asterisk on this semester. Like if things don't go well, I can blame it on the remote learning. And so that gives me an opportunity to experiment with stuff. So if there has been a learning opportunity, a program that you've wanted to try and you're not sure of and it doesn't feel right, this is an opportunity to experiment. And if it doesn't go well and you realize like this isn't working, you can stop. You can quit. You can blame it on the coronavirus. You don't have to worry about like that's the part that's tanking you. And so I think a lot of it is go piece by piece, right? Like, have you always wanted to do practice quizzes? I know when I first started teaching, I really wanted to make practice quizzes for my students. I wanted them to be able to kind of do them over and over, but man, that took so much time for me to do. This is an opportunity now that I'm switching online. I can make practice quizzes and I can use those practice quizzes again next year. All of the work that you're doing for this semester, you can use this next year. If you're putting exams on Canvas, if you're putting homework on Canvas, you can use those as practice assignments later. You can use this as a chance to figure out the right grading structure. Maybe the weighting is not correct. But again, if it's wrong, you can blame it on the remote learning and then fix it for next year. This is a chance to trim down your course lectures. I realized I had so much like extra stuff that I kept adding to my course every year. And then this has given me an opportunity to look at it and go, yeah, that's not really important. Like, why is this in here? And so a lot of it is, I think, taking care of yourself, going piece by piece through your course as it is. The two courses I teach are very, very different. One course is exam-based. It's a large lecture with 4 exams. The other class is a very hands-on. We had guest speakers. We would go on tours. We were doing projects together. And so a little bit of it was overwhelming because I had to figure out the differences between the class. But again, it's piece by piece and think about how do I change the next thing that's due? How do I change that? I haven't worried about my final exam. I haven't worried about my final paper in the other class because that's later Jadrian's problem. And so go piece by piece and think about, what's the goal? What is this going to look like next year? Are the things that I'm doing only this year, or can they improve next year? And so I think, again, this is an opportunity to be really creative in how you handle things. And so this is one of my favorite quotes. I like Einstein's history of just kind of the things that happened in his life, but I thought this is a good opportunity to think about essentially how creative you can be for next year. It's your opportunity to kind of flex your brain a little bit and think about different ways to approach problems that you wouldn't have done in a regular semester because you got comfortable. This is your opportunity to be really creative with ideas and think about how do you kind of quickly switch things over. And with that, that's I think Anne's going to pop back and then start asking me questions. Hopefully, there's Anne. And we can't hear you. There.
There we go. Sorry about that. We had a few questions get submitted. Also, anyone with any questions, please feel free to throw them in there. As well, Jadrian has done this many times, and also, man, you gotta love a solution that is, there's an asterisk on the semester to a certain extent. But the very first question, pretty easy and straightforward. Can you share the name of the text, the hidden course, with the author name again?
So I know that I don't think the name of the course, or I don't think the name. I'm looking at the book. It's like over on the couch. The last name of the person is Gubler. I actually think it's called The Missing Course. Now that I've thought about it a little bit, so it's called The Missing Course by David Gubler. It basically talks about like how would you set up a course? What are things that what are the rules that you're doing that you do because it's a rule versus you do to help people. So that's like one of the chapters. That's like the chapter I read the other night. And so it gives you some ideas about just thinking about how we structure classes. What do we want to get out of those classes, and things like that. So it's a really interesting book. It's kind of based in learning science. So it takes a large swath of stuff from humanities and STEM and all kinds of stuff. So it's appropriate for a bunch of different fields.
Awesome. We'll do next question. Lets me. Okay, how can I create a sense of community with my students?
Yeah, so okay, this is actually really good. I've gotten better at this. I will say that when the first day we came back, it was like it was chaos. Everybody was nervous. We couldn't figure out how to get on Zoom, and like everything was really, really nervous. But I think that this is a really, I think this is a good opportunity to get to know your students a little bit better. So what I do, I show up 10 minutes early, just kind of like I would in a normal class, but I log into Zoom 10 minutes early. And what I have as my slide, I'm sharing a slide that has some kind of weird, debatable question, I guess. So it's kind of like the meme debates that people have. So like the one we did last week, it had 6 different candy bars, and it said one of these has to go. Which one has to go forever? Um, and so that kind of let them start chatting, talking with each other, and like immediately the chat log just filled up with things like I hate M&Ms, they're dumb, and then they're just fighting over candy. But it's an opportunity for them to talk to each other, and I thought it was really, really neat. The one I did on Monday, it was if you could describe your hometown as a dog, which dog would it be? And it listed off like 8 different types of dogs, and it was things like pit bull, looks really tough, you don't want to mess with us. And it was like descriptions of dogs, but like it fit with cities. But it got an opportunity for like the students to kind of jump in and like share where they're from, where they're living, things like that. And then I also used a tool called Padlet, where you're able to like, it's basically like a bulletin board, where students can like log in and like put pictures of like where they're located. So they put a little marker of their hometown and then like added a picture with their dogs and stuff like that. So a little bit of it is like each week or each class period, each week, I try to have something that they can communicate that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And so like, again, that first week was really big in kind of the pessimism of like, we're not happy, this isn't what we wanted. And so then the second week, actually on the Friday of the first week, the poll question in Zoom was, what is something you're hoping to get out of this change? And so I told them like, look, we've spent the past 4 days being upset. Let's go into the weekend with some optimism. And so it was kind of a neat opportunity to think about like reconnecting with friends, getting to know your family better, getting to go outside, things like that. And so I think a lot of it is I looked up icebreakers online and then turned them into multiple choice questions. And so we do them in our Zoom sessions one-on-one, or sorry, not one-on-one, the class time Zoom sessions. That's when we're doing those. And those help a lot.
Awesome. The next question is how do you make theory-based lecture interesting? A good Jadrian question.
This is a good question so I will say that I teach very applied subjects. We couldn't, like I could make my course a theory-based course, but mine's very heavy in the application. And I think that that's really where it needs to be, because theory can get tough, especially kind of the way that the Zoom classes and online classes are set up like this. It's harder to connect with people if you don't have a good story to tell. And so I think a lot of it is finding really good stories. So I think about people who are teaching like game theory in political science or math or econ. It's showing videos of the examples of the games and saying like, look, here's a video that shows this theory happening. And I think a lot of that is thinking about which theories are the ones that you really want to cover. Like, what are the foundational ones? Like, is this course a theory course that goes on to another course later on? And in that case, like there are particular theories that you have to do. And then some of it is thinking about which theories are the ones that you're just doing because you've always done them. And so I think bringing an application when you can is really, really helpful. So this is one, I know like for us, we have a stats course that's kind of more theory based, and they try to bring in those applications. So I know a lot of the stuff of like flattening the curve that keeps getting talked about in the news. That's one of those opportunities to talk about normal distributions, where they talk about normal distributions so much in the course, but the examples are honestly kind of cheesy. They're textbook examples. But this is an opportunity to actually show and say, like, look, here's the normal distribution that we've been talking about. And so I think a lot of it is trying to bring in those applications as much as you can.
Awesome. The next question from John that came in the chat is, how do you handle security for quizzes and exams? For example, you have to prepare a new exam each semester, so students cannot capture copies of this year's exams.
Yeah, so I will actually say that I don't give back my exams during the regular semester so that I can reuse a bunch of those portions. But if I had been giving them back, I probably would have been rewriting exams each semester. And so a lot of this transition online, basically what I'm doing is I am creating a new exam compared to what I would normally give out in class. The material that's on this exam are new versions of the question. But the way that I'm kind of approaching this is I'm thinking about this in the sense of I'm going to get to try new questions that maybe I haven't tried before because I like my old questions. And then my second plan is I'm actually going to try to use this as an example of like a practice exam and kind of showing how questions are structured on my regular exams. So for my other exams is I'm essentially going forward as I'm not asking questions I save for my on-campus course. I'm using new questions, but I'm going to try to use them as a chance to test some questions I haven't tested before to see if I like them.
Next question is, how are you utilizing Packback in your courses? Has it changed from the in-person courses to the online?
Yeah, so this is actually the really easy part. As I was going through the syllabus, the Packback part was the part where I said, well, I don't have to change this at all from the grading standpoint. So I've always used Packback, and I've used Packback for the past year. So this is my third semester using Packback. Grading-wise, that was the part I could skip because it doesn't change. How I'm actually using Packback in my class has changed. So grading of Packback, not at all. So I use mine as it's a way for students to review their readings. We have reading quizzes on Mondays, and so they have to post in Packback by Sunday a question about the readings. That way it gives them a little bit of an opportunity to read beforehand. So they still have to do that. They still have to read beforehand. They still have to post in Packback. But the difference is essentially I'm not getting to talk about the questions as much. So I used to actually kind of in class, before class, highlight questions that I really liked in Packback. But because I'm using my pre-class time to do these polling questions to talk to students, I'm not highlighting Packback as much as I used to. I'm talking about it as we progress through the lecture. I'll say things like, oh, so-and-so talked about this on Packback, but I'm not highlighting Packback as much as I used to. I'm still using Packback and I'm still grading it in the same sense. So I use Packback as a way to get students to read before they have to take quizzes over the next week. So they read ahead of whatever topic I'm going to talk about in class.
Awesome. And then a question from Ahmed is, how can you make anatomy and physiology interesting online due to the fact that most students find it boring in class? So how can I keep their attention online? That's a very good question.
So I will say that for what it's worth, you're not alone in assuming that students find anatomy and physiology boring. The same thing happens in economics. I very rarely tell people I teach economics because normally if I tell them I teach economics, they moan and groan and they hate it. They tell me that it's awful and they hated it. And so I think one of the really neat things, especially in these kind of like STEM-based courses where there is a lot of really cool stuff to be able to see, is taking advantage of kind of data visualization type stuff. So for me, a lot of the stuff that I was doing in class, I didn't really get to do a lot of visualization type things. I kind of just showed them things in slides and moved on. And so there's a lot of really cool websites where you can play games in economics that we never played the games before because we just didn't have time and I didn't want to make it an assignment. Now I am making them assignments and I'm saying, here, go play this game online. I'm not as familiar with anatomy and physiology, but the sciences do such a better job than the humanities do, the social sciences, in terms of games online. I'm going to make an assumption, and I'm fairly confident this is a good assumption. There are probably games online where students can go in and actually kind of manipulate computer programs and kind of do that hands-on experience with a mouse. I'm going to assume that I feel like science probably does that better than econ does. And I know we have those in econ. And I think that's a really good way to do that, is to share those links with students, have those as assignments. Like if you were doing, in-class paper homework or something like that, or you had like participation grades, you could have students complete those activities as part of the participation grade and saying, go out and do this at the end of it, take a screenshot, submit that. And I think that's one really good way to kind of do the participation part. Yeah. So,
yeah, so he just messaged the whole thread. That's amazing.
Yeah, there's great games.
Thank you for responding, Ahmed.
Yeah. So I do those games now. In my on-camp, one of my courses, we had an in-class participation section. So like I would usually just ask them questions like ticket out the door, things like that. So now like for econ, I make them play a game called The Fiscal Ship, where they have to go try to balance the budget. And when they're done, they get a certificate. And basically they print the certificate and they submit the certificate. So if you had any kind of in-class grading, that's a really easy way to do it.
Awesome. And next question, how do you think this transition is going to impact your courses moving forward?
So I think, the biggest thing for me is thinking about the rules that I have in place and whether those rules are the right rules. So a lot of it is, it's things like, I think the default is picking an 11:59 p.m. deadline for everything. And thinking about like, is that the right deadline? Are there other times? Am I confusing students by picking certain things? I've reevaluated a lot of my rules. That has been kind of personally impactful. I think in terms of like helping my courses move forward, I am now creating question banks that I can use to give students as review material. So the multiple choice questions that I'm putting as part of my exams, like I'm now going to basically create a question bank for the exam. And now I have a question bank that way when students are reviewing for the exams, they have a place to go. And so it's giving them more resources in terms of the review and prep. Every year in my evaluations, the one comment I regularly get, and I think if you teach a kind of a math-based course, we probably all get it, is they want more practice problems. I'm creating practice problems. I'm not going to use these probably as my exam questions when I move back, but I can use them as practice questions in the future semesters.
That's awesome. And that was our final question so far. We'll put it out to the chat. If anyone else does have any other questions, please send them in right now so we can get some quick answers for you. But otherwise, now that we are getting ready to wrap it up, one thing I did want to say is that if you do have any further questions, either independently for Jadrian or in general about the Packback system, how we can use it, we are offering free licenses for anyone who did have to transition midterm online from their face-to-face classes. So far, we have 10,000 students that have utilized this system, and we're providing full support from team members like myself as well. So you will not just be implementing in the dark. We do have a team that helps you and supports you so that we can find even more people like Jadrian. But please submit your questions to us at curious@packback.co. We'll get back to you right away. And just thank you all so much for your time today. Really grateful for it. I'm wishing all of you the best and that you are safe. And yeah, please keep up the great work. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We will talk soon.
Good. I recognize some of those people. My aunt came.
Oh yeah, your aunt came.
Yeah.